name is Nicole Tee, and I'm the Director of MBA programs at NUS Business School. I have been involved in MBA programs since I did my own MBA close to 20 years ago, and I've worked in various parts of Asia and Europe. I've happily made a career switch to higher ed after 10 years in advertising and banking. In my current role, my team and I are responsible for all aspects of the MBA, from admissions to program delivery of the 4 MBA programs of NUS Business School.
I'm Adarsh Abhineet. I am basically from India, and currently I'm in New York working for Deloitte Consulting as a director in their supply chain practice. I did my majors in finance in NUS MBA program, and I graduated in 2009. So during the course of my journey within the NUS MBA, besides the finance major, I also took an active interest in strategy and marketing courses, which helped me kind of shape the well-rounded, let's say, perspective in terms of how the program outlook would look like.
So the MBA Survival Kit is a very interesting core module of the MBA that all our students go through. It is one of the 3 key pillars of our experiential core. So what it does is it enables you to build a suite of skills that will help you excel in the MBA and beyond. One very interesting element is your ability to work in cross-cultural environments and increasing your CQ, which is the cultural quotient. It also aims to improve your ability to work in teams. So you will get to discover what your personality profile is, and knowing that, then how do you improve your team dynamics, for example, and how do you navigate through the business hierarchy and work with different stakeholders. It also helps you with questions like, what framework you can use to solve complex business problems, and how do you improve your communication skills and presentation skills, for example. All these have very critical role to play in improving your executive presence, and we know that those people with very strong executive presence tend to go further in their careers. NUS MBA combines the best of many different worlds: rigorous classroom learning, practical industry exposure, global immersion, learning from diverse and accomplished peers. We also build in a lot of experiential learning. So the MBA is a very exhilarating learning environment which challenges you, and at the same time it is very nurturing. We provide a very high challenge, high support environment, as we call it. Experiential learning is essentially learning by doing. So by engaging students in hands-on experiences and reflection, they are better able to connect theories and knowledge learned in the classroom to real-world situations. So learning to cycle is a good example of experiential learning. You learn by doing it, right? And not by reading a manual. And once you learn it, you almost never forget it. Experiential learning is a very effective way of learning. It is more engaging, it is fun, it builds collaboration skills. It also develops self-confidence and leadership skills, we find. So when you practice how to have difficult conversations with your colleagues or bosses in a class, right, through role play, for example, or you manage a consulting project with a group of team members with a difficult client, for example, you are able to internalize the learnings better. So the beauty is that the MBA is a very safe space for you to do that. And if you make a mistake and you fall during the MBA, so what? There are no serious consequences. It is a very safe place to learn.
Now that, it's almost been more than a decade since I graduated from the MBA program, and almost on a yearly basis, I see new campus hires joining my company, joining my firm, I interview them during the recruitment process. And then when I reflect upon the experiential learning that NUS MBA provided, so experiential learning means different things to different people if you talk to them. For me, there are probably three fundamental aspects of experiential learning, and I'll allude to that when we get into the details from the NUS MBA program perspective. The first part of it is the experiential learning forces, or not, I won't use the force is a strong word, but enables you to have a critical thinking and move beyond the theoretical learning that you gain during your coursework. The second part of the experiential learning is it enables you to take initiative during the coursework, and not only take initiative, but also be accountable of some of the decisions that you're making during your coursework. And then the third part of it is during the experiential learnings, there are challenges and issues that comes up, which gives you an exposure what a real life work environment risks could look like, and how can you manage or how can you address that during your coursework in a more secured environment. So all the three aspects become a critical success factor when somebody graduates out of an MBA program and gets into a more of a high intense work environment, be it in a finance industry, be it in a consulting industry, or be it in a marketing domain, right? Now, talking about the experiential learning within NUS MBA itself and touching upon those three pillars that I just talked about, right? So the first part of it, which is the critical thinking and analysis, right? So if you look at the entire coursework, the way NUS MBA program is structured, it is less about theory or the concepts that are written in the book, but more about the case study enabled setup, right? So every coursework has a very pragmatic, very relevant, latest case studies that will entice the individuals to think what a real life problem would look like, and how can they deploy some of the principles that they're learning during the coursework itself. When I was doing my coursework, I'll give you an example that at that point of a time, the financial crisis had just hit the markets across the globe, right? And the first case study during my finance coursework that we were talking about was around the 1998 financial crisis that had hit the Asian market back then. So we could literally tie the dots between what was happening back in 1998 to 2008, and what would be some of the implications or a domino effect of those, not only in a finance industry, but also to our career going forward. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is that when we talk about the things like taking initiative or being accountable for, you'd observe that most of the program or coursework, especially when you take some certain electives, it's not just about completing an assignment, completing a casework, but also about certain ecosystem that has been provided to you to take in charge of. So, for example, let's say again, I'm again building upon some of the work that I did in the entrepreneur space, right? So one of the coursework that I had taken was on a social entrepreneurship, and I was in fact provided an ecosystem by NUS MBA, whereby I went to Northern Province in Thailand, and I had to work with the schools to help them identify the new source of revenues whereby they can fund the children that are going into the that are going for the educations and those remote corners of the country. And that was a completely different paradigm that I got exposed to versus what I have been learning in first 20-25 years of my lifetime, right? And the last piece of it, which I talked about, was the challenge and issues that you face, right? Before coming into the MBA program, I thought that I'm a strong proponent of diversity and inclusion, and I believe in all the right levers that needs to be addressed as we think about the cross-cultural environment. But when I started working with different sets of individuals in my coursework, in our group activities or in our project activities, I realized that I really need to modulate my thinking in terms of making sure that not only myself, but my team members, my group members also are at the same wavelength as I am in terms of understanding the problem statement, and they are my partner in terms of addressing that problem. I should not be thinking that, hey, X person is not providing or not at a certain level of aptitude that I'm expecting them. Then how do I manage such kind of a risk within that environment? In fact, if X or Y person doesn't have a certain aptitude, he or she is complementing with a certain strengths which I do not have. And that took a bit of a learning in first 6-7 months of my program to inculcate. And now, when in Deloitte, when I am the champion of the diversity and inclusion initiative within my firm, I realize some of those learnings are coming really to fruition in terms of how I'm deploying it in my organization. So those are some of it's a pretty long-winded answer, but I wanted to provide a context in terms of how I see the experiential learning and how NUS MBA enabled me to get to that level of maturity and understanding in terms of how to use those concepts in a real world environment.
So where do I start, right? Experiential learning complements the traditional learning classroom learning in many, many ways in the NUS MBA. The very first thing that you do when you step into the MBA is to go through a 5-day boot camp. Imagine that, right? We put everyone through this intensive boot camp that we call Launch Your Transformation. Through a series of activities, reflections, and sharing, students build vital soft skills that are essential for success in any leadership position. They focus on management communications, conflict resolution, impactful presentation, and team management skills. Another way that we infuse experiential learning in the MBA curriculum is through the case study method. It is used in many, many classes. You will often be presented with a scenario and be asked to solve the problems presented in the case together with your classmates, right? Often with incomplete information. So this is a very effective way for you to learn experientially. It's like going through a simulation, and you practice making decisions as if you were the protagonist in the case. So you will go through this process many, many times during the MBA. And then there is the MBA consulting project. You work on an MBA consulting project in a small group of 5 team members, and you'll be supervised by a client sponsor as well as a faculty to solve real world issues. And for those who are interested in entrepreneurial pursuits, you can join the NUS startup programs at the university level, such as the GRIP or the Tech Launch, where you'll get to work in multidisciplinary teams consisting of engineers and scientists to bring startups off the ground. So that's also a very interesting experiential learning opportunity. And there are just so many other experiential learning opportunities, such as internships, project work, global study trips, international exchange programs with 60 partner schools that we have, case competitions. The opportunities are just endless, right? So, and we are so serious about that we actually provide an experiential learning grant to successful applicants to use it on their experiential learning activities that they choose, right? And furthermore, we've also changed our grading policy recently to only 4 broad categories: distinction, merit, pass, or fail. So the idea is that so that students can focus more on learning and less on the grades.
One of the good things with the NUS MBA program is that it really fosters a cross-cultural collaboration, right? And typically in the experiential learning, what you would see is that there is a group which has, let's say, 4 or 5 people. Within that 4 or 5 people group, there are 2 or 3 dominant individuals, and then the balance 2 or 3 becomes more like a follower. Now, one of the challenges of the experiential learning is how do you bring the entire 6-member or 7-member team to the same level of, let's say, understanding so that they are delivering the right outcome. So that's point number one. And what it means is that you need to understand what are the strengths and the weak and the gaps. I won't use the word weakness. Weakness is a hard term, but what the strengths of the development area of each of the individuals look like. So having that early assessment and understanding of what are your group strengths and what are the areas that you need to work upon collectively is what I found that was a challenging task to begin with. But as I came closer to my graduation, I think I got a certain, let's say, knack of building of assessing how to work with a diverse set of people and make sure that all of us collectively deliver towards the right outcome. That is one aspect which I would say that within the experiential learning, any student will find as a challenge to start off with, but treat that as an opportunity to build their individual personality going forward.
So the thing with experiential learning is that you need to be willing to take risks, right? And you need to be able to take yourself out of your comfort zone to get the maximum benefits. So sitting in a class discussion is not going to be as enriching, right? If you are only an observer. You need to spend time to prepare yourself well for the case discussion. You need to be ready to jump into to offer and also to defend your own viewpoints during the case discussion. It's very much like going to the gym, right? You can't build your muscles just by going to the gym and observe other people doing it. You actually have to lift those weights.
Of course. So, I gave an example which was more at a firm contribution, a firm initiative level around the diversity and inclusion. I'll give you another very relevant, very fact-based example. So, in my coursework, as I mentioned that I had been majoring in finance, one of the coursework that I had taken was on the portfolio management. Now, what we were asked to do was, in fact, manage a portfolio or create a portfolio for a certain client and manage it over the course of 6 months and demonstrate what are the returns that I'm delivering for my client. What it meant was that on a week-on-week basis, I had to actively read the latest and greatest that is happening in the marketplace, be up to date in either through not only through the discussions that I was having with my project team members, but also reading up Wall Street Journal, Financial Times to make sure that I'm picking up the latest trend in the market and then deploying that into my portfolio, even though it was not a hard money, but even though we had a competitive zeal to excel in that coursework. So 6 months down the road, the portfolio outcome during my coursework was actually we were one of the top-rated group in that entire coursework, whereby we delivered the highest returns to that fictitious client that we talked about. As I graduated out of my coursework and I joined Deloitte in a couple of years' time, and I was actually asked to take in charge of the entire life sciences client portfolio and help them prioritize how can we break into the new revenue stream for the top tier clients within the life sciences space across the globe. And that's where those experiential learning of picking up the latest trends, identifying what's happening with each of the companies, going through their annual reports, balance sheets, trying to decipher what issues each company is facing, and then using that information to build the client relationship, client interaction, and positioning our value proposition in terms of how we can address that client problem statement became a critical DNA in terms of how I execute my day-to-day work as of today. So even this morning, I was going into a client meeting. This was a net new client, which I didn't have a lot of background upon. The first thing I did was I read their annual report and balance sheet statement to understand how they are positioned in the marketplace. And this entire, the DNA has come from the learnings that I gained in the NUS MBA program.
Taking an MBA is such a life-changing experience. But if you're joining an MBA, such as the one at NUS, where you can customize your own MBA journey, right, and where the permutations are endless, it really does help if you can come in with a clear idea of what you want to achieve. Is it a certain specialization that you're interested in, or certain topics that you want to know about, or or is it international experience that you want to gain, or is it networking? You're building your network. So I think knowing what's important to you will help you spend your time wisely, because after all, you only have 24 hours a day.
I would say three things. They should definitely keep in mind. First of all, when they join an NUS MBA program, they should set aside any kind of prejudice or unconscious bias that they are coming up with coming into the program itself. And all of us have some degree of conscious and unconscious biasness, which you may not be aware of, but you will realize very quickly when you get into such kind of experiential learning environment. So set aside all the prejudice or unconscious biasness. Go with an open mind. That's point number one. The second point is learn to take initiatives. I think it is imperative that experiential learning demands that you take initiative and be accountable for the actions. Be it, for example, let's say a case study has been given to you, right? It's not as if that you are only responsible for solving an X portion of the case study. You should take initiative to understand the full length of what the case study is, what are the problems that your team members are solving, and how you can complement them in the whole solution building process. So taking initiative is going to be the second key element. The third key part is in the experiential learning demands that you are almost like a caterpillar who feeds constantly through the day, right? So the metaphor that I'm trying to use over here is that you should be hungry for knowledge. So beyond the books, you should have an appetite to read. What it means is that your day should have at least a couple of hours spent to what's happening in the world markets, or what's happening in the industry that you're focusing upon, be it reading a Financial Express or Financial Times or Wall Street Journal, whichever text or whichever source of avenue that you think is the right avenue for you to procure the knowledge. But be hungry for the knowledge. You need to be up to date in terms of your knowledge, because last 10 years the whole world is moved significantly, and every year you see a net new challenge coming about. A couple of years back, COVID was a challenge. Today, Russia-Ukraine war is a challenge. Tomorrow, who knows what the new challenge comes about? And what the companies are demanding at the moment are the individuals who are not just have an academic acumen, but are they resilient and agile enough to adjust to the new environment as the macroeconomic factors changes around them. So it's imperative that you be up to speed, up to date in terms of what's happening in the market, and use that as a basis to be resilient, to be agile in your learning process during the course of the MBA work.